and behind it was Senator McCarthy. The great Senator of the United States had put this photographer up to this cheap little silly trick so he could get a picture of him and me standing side by side. You're not serious when you engage in stuff like that.
What was a joke for Joe McCarthy was deadly serious for John Service. Despite McCarthy's failure to prove any of his charges, Service's career was destroyed. One of the country's most knowledgeable experts on China spent his last days in the Foreign Service stamping passports in Liverpool, England.
Even though some people didn't understand communism, the word was a threat. They outfoxed our President Roosevelt on the Yalta, and it seemed that they got away with everything, the big piece of the pie. And so when McCarthy started the hearings, I was all for his going after the communists.
Here was Tail Gunner Joe talking about commies. Who were protecting the commies? The Democrats. And so the Democrat, the name liberal and Democrat became identified with pro-communist or communist sympathizer. Pinko was used constantly in those days.
You get the beginning of what is called McCarthyism because one party has really been in power too long, and much of the stuff that was surfaced as McCarthyism was an attempt of the Republican Party, which has been out for 20 years, to find an issue which would allow it back into power.
Plans have been discussed by leading members of the Communist Party and agents of the Soviet secret police to obtain blank American passports from the United States State Department, from communists employed in the State Department. But they say, oh, McCarthy, don't name them. Yes, I'll give that to Milwaukee's Daily Worker.
He was a demagogue, but he didn't look like a demagogue. He didn't act like a demagogue. He didn't speak like a demagogue. People, when they thought of demagogues, thought of Adolf Hitlers who held audiences in their sway. Joe McCarthy had this rumpled look, and he'd get up before the crowd, and he would whine, and he would stumble, and I think he would even deliberately shuffle through his papers as if searching diligently for the right name and the right fact. And he'd have to go back and repeat himself. And that was mistaken by a large number of people as sincerity. And he came across as a sincere person, and therefore as a believable person, and therefore as the most dangerous of demagogues.
Our function in coming back on the committee is not to expose and prosecute communists. Senator, would you like to hear this? It's about you.
Eventually, Tail Gunner Joe went too far. Wild and groundless allegations of communist infiltration of the United States Army cost him the support of even his most fervent allies.
And you don't have to have everybody looking at you all the time you're talking.
Point is well taken.
I'm the great pretender.
During his anti-communist crusade, McCarthy ruined the lives of thousands of innocent people. But the man who had claimed the nation's undivided attention was ostracized and all but forgotten when he died of liver failure at the age of 48.
But tomorrow will say you've left me to grieve all alone.
It was a mean time, a time for mean heroes. Heroes like Mike Hammer.
You almost wrecked my car. Well? Get in.
pulp fiction private eye Mike Hammer was the creation of a former lifeguard and fighter pilot from Brooklyn, who became the most popular writer of the 1950s.
I always said I was a chewing gum of American literature, which I am. I'm not a detective writer. I'm a mystery writer. Now, Earl Stanley Gardner was a detective writer. He did everything by the book and in good notes. He was a great writer, but he had a different style. My style went into, I had a lot of sex, violence, and love, emotional stuff, and I didn't stay quite to the pattern that they had.
I squeezed until my fingers were buried in the flesh of his throat, and his hands clawed at my arm frantically, trying to tear me away. I held him down until he was on his knees, and dead as he was ever gonna be.
He wouldn't have reached his peak of popularity if Splain hadn't been a very good writer. I think Splain was a writer of enormous energy and invention. But he was driven by the ethos of the period, which was an anti-communist ethos. So Mike Hammer was the ultimate sort of John Wayne hero in a way. You know, the hell with the subpoenas, the hell with the Constitution, particularly the hell with the Constitution, the hell with the Fifth Amendment. If you're a commie, I'm going to shoot you right between the eyes and give you a real good beating on the way.
Where's Mother?
Where is she? Where is she? Where is she?
Mike Hammer was a steely enforcer whose mission was to exterminate those who would destroy America from within or without.
There was a moment when Mickey turned away from your run-of-the-mill bad guys and rats and things to go after commie rats and things. And I think Spillane writes, they were commies. They were real sons of bitches who should have died long ago. They never thought there were people like me in this country. Great stuff.
Spillane's books sold on a winning formula of commie bashing, sex, and violence. An explosion in paperback publishing technology made it possible to turn out millions of inexpensive books quickly. That meant Spillane's novels were available and cheap. Critics charged that Spillane was exciting the country's vigilante streak. He was called a dangerous paranoid. His creation, Mike Hammer, a sadistic misfit.
I went to a tea party, and at the tea party were all these funny little people that read books and whatnot. So this guy came up to me, a little bitty guy. He said, now this is what he said to me. I can still remember the words like I'm hearing them from the day when he came out of his mouth. He says, what a terrible commentary on the reading habits of the American public to think that you have 7 out of the top 10 of all-time bestsellers. I said, oh, shut up, you're lucky I didn't write 3 more. Then I did, and they had to change the category out of 15 out of the top 25.
For an author who once wrote comic books for a living, Mickey Spillane had come a long way. By 1953, his books had sold over 17 million copies. The man who denied any conscious attempt to cash in on the anti-communist hysteria of the day was on his way to becoming one of the best-selling American writers of all time. But even Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer was no match for the atomic demons that haunted the American psyche.
Lucky Strike presents Your Hit Parade.
In 1950, Your Hit Parade made its debut on the infant medium of television. 100 stations across the country now brought TV into 8 million American homes. Entering the American language were the words heliport, captive audience, and for products designed by women, femineered. In Boston, masked gunmen stole a record $2.8 million from the Brinks Express Company. The FBI, believing the robbery to be a communist conspiracy, would spend 6 years and $129 million solving the case. Days were numbered for elevator operators across the country when the Otis Elevator Company began installing a new passenger lift with automatic doors. A door opened for Althea Gibson,